You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers! Dr. Velma Bagby is a best-selling and award-winning author, certified dating relationship coach, and ordained minister. With over 15 books to her name, Dr. Velma's work focuses on guiding Christian women through the complexities of dating and relationships with wisdom and faith. Her books, including the popular Catch series, use relatable analogies and biblical principles to help readers navigate love and marriage. Dr. Velma's engaging storytelling and practical advice have made her a trusted voice for those seeking godly relationships. Please put your hands together and welcome Dr. V to the show. Thank you so much, Dr. V, for joining me. Listen, we've been talking offline, and I've got to say, we've already had a show and a half offline. So I'm just going to apologize in advance to the listeners because we're at a 10. Okay. We are at a 10, but I'm going to pull it in to let the listeners get caught up to all of this excitement.
It's been exciting.
Yes, before we get started, as is my tradition, we are going to toast to a fantastic show. And I am drinking sparkling water. I have one of those wonderful soda streams because I love sparkling water. Awesome. And you are drinking something warm.
Coffee.
Well, cheers.
Cheers to you.
So, that's good. I read your bio in the intro, and I want to dive right in to discuss the books that you've written. You write from a Christian perspective of Christian fiction, and there's so much to dive into here. But first, I do want to start with what inspired you to start writing, and how has your journey evolved since your first book?
Well, I felt that after retiring in 2012, that was it for me. In my job as a deputy administrator for the state government, I wrote and designed programs and training and classes all the time. It was part of my existence in that position. And when I retired, I thought all of that was going to go away until I felt led by God to have a conversation with my adult daughters. They had questions about men and what was happening with dating issues. And so we got into that conversation. So my very first book that I wrote took me 6 years just trying to discover, how do I want to say that? How should I present this? And that was before I wrote the series, the Catch series. It was a nonfiction book called Your Adam is Asleep Until God Opens His Eyes. They asked me, Mom, why are men so slow? Why don't they respond well? What's the problem? I said, well, the right one, his eyes will open to you, because when a man findeth the wife, he finds a good thing. So we talked about that. And I thought, okay, that's it. But it was like God was saying, no, you've been blessed to have a long-term marriage. There's things that others need to know what you know, and share it. And so that's how I got into writing this one novel. I thought it was going to be one novel.
One and done.
Said, how do I present this information in a way that will be receptive? Because there's a lot of things that I thought I needed to cover that's not addressed anymore. We used to receive training for these things, because I'm 70 now.
Stop.
Yes. I wrote my first book at 65.
You look absolutely phenomenally amazing.
That's so sweet of you. Thank you.
Oh, that's the truth of me. Oh, my word.
Thank you. That's so sweet. So I felt like God was saying, you need to share. You need to, and now we've been married 50 years. So you really need to share it and really give these tips and put it in writing. And so that very first book, I needed to know, okay, is it nonfiction, or how do I do this? And I remember reading a blog where the lady said, I recognize too that a lot of people in Christian community did not warm up to fiction.
Yeah.
They like nonfiction because then you can quote scriptures and things of that nature. I said, well, no, how do I really address it? And I read this blog, and the lady said, did you know that Jesus wrote over 55 parables and they were fictional stories? And it went click.
Yes.
That's what I want to
Absolutely.
do. He told stories in a way that allowed the person to see themselves in them.
Yes.
He never said, this is you, you need to stop, nothing. He told the
Right.
story, used something that resonated with them,
With the
something they were
listener.
familiar with. And
Yeah.
then he included in the story the way to change or the way out. And at the end, it was still up to them. He didn't stop
Yeah.
and say, okay, now what are you going to do? No, he did
Right.
not. He just said, these are the tools you need. If this is what you have, and then went on. And
Yeah.
so that's why I gravitated towards Christian contemporary fiction because it allowed me to weave these stories in a way that I knew these stories. I knew the women, ministered to women for years, over 30 years, now over 40 years. And so how do I put these in stories that will allow people to see themselves? And I'm telling you, it really blessed me, the result. The very first novel, I thought that was it. I wasn't
Uh-huh.
looking to write a series at all, but the because of the readers who wanted to know more. Some said, "You got me, Dr. Velma, looking at guys now. When I meet one, okay, which fish are you? Are you the catfish? Are you that darn sturgeon? Which one are you?"
And so that leads us right in then. So let's go ahead and jump in because in the wrong catch, you
Mhm.
introduce new fishes. Well, let's just start with the first one. The
Okay,
first book is The Catch No One Wants.
once.
Now,
Hmm.
talk to us about that. And how did you come up with the title and the analogies that you use?
I did a deep dive with one of my marketing counselors and presented the idea of the book with her, and we just did a deep dive, just going through different scenarios and what this could be. Because the story is about a man, a pastor who actually teaches a singles class. The things that I talk about in the book are the things he actually covers in his ministry. But his one daughter, he had three children, but the last daughter seemed to be struggling with following those guidelines he provided in the class. And he watched her make all these mistakes in her dating life, successful, got her college degree, doing well in business. But this particular piece, because she thought she wanted to be married by 30, she's now
Mm,
32. She just started pressing and going through men in and out of relationships in a hurry to find the one for herself. But what she didn't notice was there was the guy that had been in her life most of
the
her
whole
life.
time.
He worked with his father in construction, did some work at the house, but she judged him based on what he did for his career. What she did not know was over time, he had built a successful business and expanded his father's business, and he's now a multimillionaire. So going into a situation where you're prejudging a person based on
Yeah.
that, because you would have turned away had God called in David out of the field like he did,
Right. Right.
and he was coming in smelling like sheep to the party while everybody else looked like
With
they should
cologne,
have been on the
freshly
front of the
showered. Yes.
GQ magazine, his brothers. But here he comes in, and you would have judged him and said, "Oh, that can't be the one." And God says, "No, that's the one because I like his heart." And so that's the
Exactly.
whole message. Her father had to show her the mistakes she was making,
Hmm.
dating all these examples, like the catfish, the sturgeon, the salmon, all of those different guys, and how she was making a mistake. And really, she should have been thankful that she didn't get herself into trouble and go any further than what she did. So at the end of it all, she had to go back home after their little fishing trip. That's what he did, his
Hmm.
intervention. She had to do a deep dive in some of the material he gave her to reclaim who she was, to really discover who she is and
Hmm.
make sure she fixed the things that she needed to fix in herself because she wasn't really ready for a person by the way she was dating these guys. And so, in the end, once she did the work and really solidified who she was,
Yeah.
and own that, her eyes opened to this young man that had been in her life all this time.
And I like
He,
that you showed that it wasn't just her looking for the wrong man, it was that she herself was in a wrong position, right? And
yeah,
oftentimes we put so much pressure on the women to look for the right mate and overlooking the fact that they aren't the right person that he would
right,
even be looking for.
right.
And so there
That's
was a
right.
reason why she didn't garner his attention was
Yes,
because she was in the wrong state. Now, that
absolutely.
first book led you then to the wrong catch. So
Mm-hmm.
we go from the catch no one wants, which in fact was the one we all want. We just are ignorant in
Right.
our view
Mm-hmm.
to see it, to the wrong catch. Now, talk to us about the wrong catch, but the fact that you introduce new fish analogies, and I'm reading here, you introduce the black bass and the
Mm-hmm.
pike fish. And then talk to us about what inspired you to bring in these new characters and why those in particular.
Well, I liked that because these are all narcissistic guys, and can be very attractive to women who see
Mm,
that, and many of them very successful, which is what we have in the story.
uh-huh.
And then I decided to throw another uh, little glitch in there and use twins who were identical, who dated the same women, but the women didn't know they were dating the same men. So that was one of the little tricks they had. And then these are all groups that's found in this multi-million dollar business, fishing business. They're considered the elitists of fish because guys who go after them in a tournament, they can win millions of dollars in that tournament. And the problem is these fish are so strong that it takes a team of men to try to catch one, because they will fly up out of the water trying to knock that hook out of their mouths, because they're not interested in being caught
God, uh-huh.
by anyone.
Uh-huh.
And so they will fight commitment tooth and nail because they want to be the number one. And if they're the elitists of the elitists, where does that place a woman in their lives? The woman who's called to be the center of his attention, his crown. She can't be in that position if he's already there.
Right.
And that's who
Now,
these fish are.
what was it like? Because you now have a darn PhD in fishology or whatever the correct term
I love
is
that.
for fish. So, what is this like now with all of this vast knowledge that you have on fish? Do you find yourself, wondering why did I pick fish because I have all this knowledge about fish?
Not really, because in the beginning, remember, I was looking at the parables and how Jesus approached his stories, and fish just came normally and
Yeah.
and was natural. And I have a brother, my older brother, he is an expert at fishing, and so I had this conversation with him in the beginning. Tell me about, I was just searching. Tell
Uh-huh.
me about the fish you like to catch. And when he began describing the fish, what type of bait, where he had to go to catch it, and the personality of the fish, it just clicked automatically. I said, "Oh,
That's it.
catfish down in the clubs, waiting on the first fish that walks in the door. Sturgeon hates to get caught. Oh, he's a minister. He travels, and everywhere he goes, he's well. Anyway, the sturgeon,
We yes, we ladies, you just have
he
to read.
nibbles, and
He
he's
nibbles,
sneaky because the people who fish for sturgeons hate them because you're thinking you have bait on your hook, and the
and
sturgeon
they've
has
already
already
taken it.
taken it and gone. Yes.
Now, in the wrong catch,
Mm-hmm.
we're introduced to the character, and I'm reading here Veronica Dawson Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about her and was she fashioned after someone in particular?
Well, all of my stories are fashioned from someone I've met, some issue I've already witnessed.
Uh-huh.
As a pastor's wife, my husband was in the ministry and over in church. And I remember sitting with him in pre-marriage counseling sessions, sitting there thinking, now why do people think that we're going to fix a problem for them when the real problem is you're trying to marry the wrong person?
Ooh, now we
And
can
so
wait. We can pop up a whole tent and have revival on just that. But we're
just
gonna keep
that.
going. Go ahead. Go
And
ahead.
so all of these stories came from somewhere, came from something I already witnessed and experienced. My one particular chapter was one I was really passionate about. It's chapter 6 in the very first book that dealt with abusive relationships. And we're just
Mhm.
moving out of that season where we talked about the month
Domestic
of
violence, yes.
domestic violence. And I witnessed it firsthand, ministering to someone, a young woman who was being beaten on and had a child that was where the man was gravitating towards the child to do the same thing. And I had the opportunity to talk with her to try to get her the tools that she needed to step away from that. And that woman, I can look at her as I talk to her that it was not
It wasn't
going
registering.
anywhere. It was
Mhm.
not registering. And I often think about her, and she left, and no one knew where she moved to. No one had any contact with her anymore. So she purposely didn't want anybody to get involved in her business. And so I wrote that chapter for that reason. And one lady in my doctor's office was telling me about a friend that was in a similar situation. And she has my books. And I said, why don't you give her the book? Let her read the chapter. Remember going back to let people discover themselves. Do you know that story spoke to that woman and she got out of that relationship? So
And
if
that's the
that can
power of the
happen,
written word. That is the power
absolutely.
of stories that are created in such a way that they resonate with the reader,
Yes.
right? And bringing that
Yes.
authenticity to it. Now, how do you balance all the roles that you have in terms of being a minister and a coach and a wife and a mother and a writer
Hmm.
and the business person? How is all of that balanced in such a way that
Hmm.
you don't become a character in your own book?
Absolutely. I make sure that I have certain times of the week that I am not
Mm,
involved with any of these things. I purposely schedule a lot of my interviews that I have to do for my podcast on Mondays and Tuesdays when it's the quietest in my house. But Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I pretty much do a few other things concerning my household, but I try to make sure that I remember my number one priority is I'm still a married woman. I
yes.
still have a house to run. I still like to cook for my family. And so I choose to make sure that that is always available. The time is always available for me to do that. My
Yeah.
husband and loves, he and I loves binge watching our favorite shows. There will be time for that too. And so that means my phone goes off. I'm not answering emails. I'm not going to address anything until the next day that I have an opening to do all those things. So you have to have a balance.
And that's so important because you know, and I know being both in ministry and as writers, and my
Yes.
husband and I have been together 43 years, and you know,
Look at
we're
that.
we're not at that 50, but we're getting there.
Hey.
And you know, when you put yourself
Mm-hmm.
on the target,
Yeah,
right? There's no other way to say it.
that's
We
right.
hear about these individuals that come out talking about relationships. They may have been married 2 years, 3 years, and they think they have the answers. And
They
they
don't.
go out and they're broadcasting, this is what I did and this is what I have, only to find out that the very people that they're speaking to have snuck through the back door. And
Right.
while they're out preaching to the world, they come home to an empty house or a house with changed locks.
Yes.
And so I appreciate that you practice what you preach so that
Mm-hmm.
you don't become the very thing that you're writing about for others to avoid.
Absolutely.
And how important is that for young writers who may say, you know what, I want to write, I love the thought of writing Christian fiction. I don't want to have my words aligned with, you know, some of the things that they may see in the world is not aligning with their faith. What are
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that you would say to them in terms of being mindful, right, as they're entering into that genre and into that field?
Well, we all have assignments, and don't see your family and your home life as something separate from what you have to do in your business. I mean, we need grace in everything we've been given to do, whatever the assignment is, and therefore we have to make sure that we're honoring God and what He's given us. And so, what would it look like me trying to honor God in writing, but I'm ignoring the other thing He's given me?
Yeah.
He's given me a family. He's given me a husband. That will not work. And believe me, I've had moments in my life where God had to sit me down if I ventured too far in a
Mm-hmm.
particular direction. God had to sit me down. I'm going, okay, why am I'm doing everything you told me to do? Why are you sitting me down? Oh, I remember a whole year I wrote a book about it, a place called Down. And I remember saying to God, God, I'm doing what I'm supposed to. Why are you allowing this to happen? But it wasn't about me and what I was
Mm-hmm.
doing. It really was about what God had in store for me after that experience. Because my writing took off after that. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just like gold will not shine on its own. It has to go into the fire. And God will allow us into that space so that He can burn off what He cannot use before He moves you forward. And so just learning that kind of wisdom and understanding that everything we have is a gift from Him, and therefore honor Him in it. And so if
Nice.
you want to honor Him in it, you'll make sure you have enough time in the day to make sure you're doing what you should be doing in each of those things. And maybe today is not one of those things. Maybe that thing has to be addressed tomorrow while you focus on something else. But you have to learn to balance every gift that God has given you.
That is so powerful. And thank you for that. Now, up
Mm-hmm.
until now, we have been talking about women identifying these rascals that are coming, trying to vie for our attention, these catfish, which is my favorite fish, but we're not going to talk about that.
No.
That's down there trying to nibble at our toes and whatnot. And I know that there had to come a point that the men threw a flag on the play, cut cut the line on the fishing pole and said, okay, Dr. V, we aren't the issue all the time. What are you going to do about these women? Did that time come and what did you do to address it?
It did come when they reached out to me, and I decided to conduct my own little interview of a few of the guys I knew who were godly men, upstanding men. Tell me about your dating life. What are some of the challenges? I was just blown away by the things they told me.
Uh-huh.
I said, I'm so sorry for you guys. I said, because I'm watching a few people I know just with the wrong person.
Mm.
And I would love for them to have somebody different, but it is what it is and the choices. And so Grayson, the father, comes back with producing a workshop, a conference for the men, because it gets around the church what he did with the women. So both those two books, first two books are, well, book one is based on the daughter. Book two is a conference that he has where he's talking to women more about the fish. And then book three, he does a conference for the men to address what the men said. And in the book, I actually say in the book that Grayson, the father, interviewed men to get their opinion. But those interviews that I have in the book are the actual things that the guys told me.
And what's the title of that one?
That's the wrong catch. She'll tear down the house.
Ooh, now I know that she'll tear down a house as part of her scripture. And which verse is it that you drew that
It's
from?
14 and 1b. 14 1 of the whole thing says a wise woman builds, that's A, but a foolish one tears down the house.
With her
And that's what it's
own
based on,
hands,
with their own
tears it
hands.
down.
That's right.
And so that is so powerful to understand that. Now, I know that the series did not stop there. So we're continuing to talk about not only the healthy relationships or how to build those, but and
Mm-hmm.
how to look out for those toxic relationships. But I know that there is a book 4 that you
Yeah.
are able to pull in everything. And it's something about those fools that you pulled all together to discuss in book 4. Tell us about that.
And it released on April Fool's Day as I was
Mm,
directed. God gives you wisdom. He says, okay, release it on that day. And it was because at some point, writing fiction, it's scriptural based, but I couldn't reference scripture. And I
mhm.
said, well, at some point, people are going to want to know, where are those scriptures? What does it say? Because Grayson references the fact that God calls certain behaviors foolish behavior. He was the one that coined the term fool. I didn't come up with that. God calls a particular behavior, a particular person who practices that behavior, a fool.
Mhm.
So, how do I address that if somebody wants to know? So, that's where the Book of Fools came to be, book number 4. And in
Yes.
there, I address those foolish behaviors based on those scriptures. And then there's a prompt that says, if for instance, his mouth brings destruction. That's Proverbs 10 and 14. And the question is, can you see yourself with a person whose mouth brings destruction? So that's something to think about in a dating relationship, in a business relationship, even in a friendship. These are great scriptures to have and be aware of, that God has already addressed what foolish behavior looks like. And
And I
so,
like that one because that's a workbook to where the reader has to participate
yep,
in the advancement of their understanding.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And
Wonderful.
so
What's been
that's
the
why
feedback from readers who have purchased that book?
so many people phenomenal. And like I just said, beyond dating. a business person said to me, wow, this is great for business. So that as you trying to do your due diligence and trying to affirm whether or not you want to move forward in a business relationship with someone, this is absolutely something people need to be aware of. The wisdom is already there. We don't have to reinvent it.
Wonderful. Where are the listeners able to engage with you and to learn more about what you're doing and to find out more about your podcast, Finding Your Voice, and just to find out all things Dr. V?
I have my website, drvelmabagby.com, and they'll get an opportunity to listen in on my former podcast, which I had earlier in the year, which was called Dr. Velma Talks, Dating, Relationships, and Marriage. And so I address a lot of the issues more in that podcast series. So you can listen in or you can read the blog. There's some written blogs as well. But feel free to connect with me on drvelmabagby.com.
Wonderful. Listen, I can talk to you all day because there's so much rich information in each of the books. And I know that we essentially just skimmed over, all four of them, which I think that, the reader has gleaned enough to head out immediately to your website, to all sites where they're able to purchase books online,
Yes.
to get
Yes.
copies. And so we've come to the part of our show, which a lot of the authors really do like. I call it One for the Road. It simply is a this or that. So I'm going to ask you a series of this or that and just
Mm-hmm.
yell out the one that resonates with you the most. And these are kind of silly. So we're just going to have fun. Okay.
Okay.
Would you rather have a pet dragon or a pet unicorn?
Neither.
Neither. I love it. Travel to the past and meet dinosaurs or to the future to meet aliens?
Neither.
This is going to be one for the road, neither. Okay, always sing instead of speak or dance everywhere you go.
Dance everywhere I go.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yes.
Nice.
Even if I'm dancing inside.
Yes. Have the ability to shrink to the size of an ant or be as tall as a skyscraper.
Tall as a skyscraper.
That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, always be in pajamas or always be in a fancy outfit, because you're very fancy right now.
PJs. When I relax, I enjoy relaxing.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. V, this was phenomenal. I am
Thank
certain
you.
that anyone that is in a new relationship or looking for a relationship, or those such as us that have 4 and 5 decades under our belts, will
Yeah.
glean something from your books. They're not
Mm-hmm.
just inspirational, which in and of itself is great, but they're also very entertaining. You have
Mm-hmm.
well rounded characters who are going through real life issues. And that, in and of itself, is such a great find. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
certain that all of the readers are going to be excited to hang out with you in literary land, learning everything that there is to know about all things Dr. V.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to be here on this show with you today. I'm glad we were able to connect.
Yes, me as well. And this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.